Thanks, Aline. And I'm glad to be back at the Automation Virtual Summit for 2023. I'm going to be talking today about the breadth and how automation has really spread across the enterprise. So we've titled this Automation Knows No Boundaries, and let's go ahead and get started. It's no surprise to anyone who works in enterprise these days that automation really has expanded across the enterprise, and the drive to do more with automation continues. We see enterprises expanding their use of automation really across their operations. Can be routine tasks like data entry, inventory management, and customer support. You see it in way more complex processes like supply chain management or quality control and inspections in manufacturing. If it can be automated, organizations are thinking about automating it. Businesses are really leveraging automation also to enhance customer experiences and engage customers really on a more individualized level. You see this with personalized marketing campaigns. There's systems to recommend things to users and also to tailor communications. And really, automation is being integrated into the decision-making process within enterprises as well. You've probably heard data-driven organization. Bringing that data there's a lot of automation behind doing that, and a lot of automation in providing these sort of assisted decision-making systems, whether that's through data analysis or through predictive systems. If automation is done right, it really contributes to the enterprise growth and competitiveness. And we shouldn't forget that workload automation and orchestration really reach across the enterprise already. I've summarized some data here from several different survey questions from earlier this year in 2023, where we asked just how automation was being used by different business functions and business departments. So the first one was, workload is extremely or very important. We asked how important it was, and these are the results for extremely or very important. Finance tops the list, and if you are involved at all in workload automation and orchestration, you know that the financial close at the end of the month is a really big part of that process. But you see others on here. Supply chain was the second listed as most important. Service organizations, sales organizations, human resources, manufacturing, all top the list. And there was a lot more. I just grabbed the top 6 on each one of these. We also asked which business functions are using workload automation self-service. And in this case, I'm showing you the results for daily or multiple times per week. And again, service pops right to the top of that list. 75% of organizations said that their service organization is using these self-service tools either daily or multiple times a week. I was a bit surprised to see sales pop to the second spot on that list at 71%. But sure enough, we see, there's a lot of support for sales and reporting to sales about their own activities that rely a lot on workload automation, and the dashboards are used by them as well. Supply chain, finance, they both tied at around 67%. Manufacturing, human resources, right in that same ballpark. I mean, these organizations are leveraging these dashboards and these other self-service functions because the underlying automation is important to them. So we already have workload automation and orchestration reaching across. And when we look at who's sponsoring new automation or orchestration initiatives, it's no surprise operations would top that list and that the app development teams might be second. But here again, service, finance, supply chain, and sales are all right behind them as also sponsoring new initiatives. So to think that automation, the modern automations aren't relying on and pulling in workload automations, one of the older automations in the enterprise, would be wrong. Though the older tools are very key and have been modernized in many ways to support these new broader automation initiatives. So workload is really there and a key part of bringing that forward. One of the things I wanted to talk about was some new initiatives in organizations. And for me, that really roots around the term digital transformation, which is really closely intertwined with any type of enterprise automation trend. I mean, not everything is necessarily going digital, but a lot of it becomes a digital transformed process, especially when you start to look end to end across the organization. Digital transformation involves leveraging these digital technologies, mobile devices, cloud, you know, you're familiar with those techs, to really improve or change business operations, customer experiences, and really even in many cases, entire business models, as we're familiar with. When you go from brick and mortar to full online, when you go, born in the cloud type stuff, to even just smaller things that, again, just a dashboard on a mobile phone might really, enable someone in sales. So some are more radical than others. They all tend to focus on cloud computing because it's really the foundational element. A lot of these new digital processes are going to live in the cloud or span data they might source from mainframes, but they're going to be delivered in more a mobile, modern fashion, which really puts the cloud architect at the center of a lot of the beginnings of these things as new initiatives start up. And they don't always necessarily know about what's capable within the workload automation tools. But they're relying on cloud for the infrastructure, for the resources, and in many cases, like packaged services that exist in these cloud environments. So they're wrapped into a lot of this digital transformation. And automation really helps the enterprise adapt, innovate, and thrive in these increasingly digital environments. Customers have just come to expect it. We see that in my research, 97% of organizations have some form of digital transformation underway or already delivered. And as we look at this next slide, this is a summary of a more detailed question that I asked earlier this year. But I started with, where are we at in the process? Because we've really been talking about digital transformation for over 10 years now. I think the first reference was a consulting firm about 11 years ago. So it's been a topic for a long time. So when I wanted to assess, well, really, where is the market in adopting these technologies? What I found here, and I'm summarizing about 10 more detailed questions, but really lump them into categories. So you can see that little 3% red bar there on the far left. That is the group that said, I'm not doing any of this. Everybody else is doing something, 97% of them. But while only that 17%, the blue bar, are mature, or the ones to the far right, 4% feel like they're already thinking about what's the second generation of this. They're the very early adopters. The bulk of the market is in those orange and green bars. 40% are really in the early stages here of getting started with digital transformation. And 37% might have 1, 2, 3 projects underway. Maybe they've delivered a couple, but they have a long list to go. We're going to be talking about digital transformation probably for another decade before all of this is finished. Or another buzz term will catch on, but it'll really much be the same activities, which is, how do we modernize and automate the enterprise? So there's still a lot of this activity underway, but we do have this 21% who have done, are in their mind done with their initial goals or thinking about what's next. And it might be nice for the rest of us to learn from what their experiences have been. So I've got some additional data points from this research that I think will be interesting. The first here is workload automation and orchestration supports the digital transformation journey. To think that, these new processes are just going to ignore what organizations have relied on to keep things running on a timely fashion, for the last 40 years would be wrong. There's a lot of best practices. There's a lot of control around automation built into these tools, and they have been modernized all along the way. And we can see that those that are doing digital transformation are really leaning on these capabilities. The number one capability here was workload automation supports the DevOps processes and increases my development speed. So for 51% of organizations, the first benefit to their digital transformation journey from workload automation tools has been the DevOps integration and just automating those processes for, moving code from dev to test, building environments along the way, getting it moved into production, and so on. The second there, workload automation is used for cloud infrastructure configuration. As I said, a lot of these processes are going to end up on cloud. And building out those cloud environments, both in dev and test, and then making sure that they're built the same way in production, and then managing them once they're in production as things change, as capacity has to change. There's a lot of automation that is already involved in those processes. And let's not forget, there's still a lot of stuff running on premises, and with these tools also help with configuration in the on-prem environments. We also see there's a lot of data moving in these modern digitalized processes. And workload automation tools have been involved in moving data and orchestrating the movement of data if they're not moving it directly for quite some time. So, for 39% of organizations, that file transfer capability is a big part of how they're supporting their digital transformation journey with their existing workload automation tools. And workload automation connects and orchestrates disparate digital transformation capabilities. When I wrote that question, I was really hoping for a result that was as good as this. 33% of organizations said, yeah, I'm actually using the orchestration capabilities of my workload tools to connect these processes in many cases. And beyond DevOps, just release management automation for 28%, that was a big part of their process. And then there's a more traditional role, just getting things to run on time, whether that's event-based triggers or whether it's time-based triggers. The more traditional role of workload is still quite important for 27% of the organizations. And I thought this one was really interesting. WLA is key for end-to-end orchestration on one or more digital capabilities. So if you start crossing environments, there's a lot of orchestration that can be done with the workload tools. That means you don't have to write other new code. And while that's only 27% of the organizations who've unlocked that, I think that that's a really key takeaway here is, why build what exists and runs? If you can leverage what's there, leverage it. It takes some of the work off the table, and it's proven processes. And it means that the operations folks already know what to do with it because they know these tools. If you build a new process elsewhere, sometimes you end up figuring out how to operate it and manage it and track it later because you didn't integrate it right up front with the operations team. The last thing on here, while it's only 15% of organizations, workload orchestration allows new applications and digital transformation with less developer time. These folks have actually figured that out. What don't I have to code because I can already take advantage of it in the workload automation tool through its orchestration capabilities. And let's not forget, workload automation is integrated everywhere. It's got awareness into SLA policies. It's got awareness into configuration. It can spin up environments. It can tear down environments. It can move data around. These are all things that you can write new code for, or you can leverage this tool and focus on your new process without having to build those other capabilities. And many organizations have figured that out, but I think there's room for improvement there. And as I said, there's a lot of cloud involved in this digital transformation stuff, and workload automation and orchestration does play a significant role in supporting cloud services. So we have storage here is the most used function. So in dealing with storage services, workload automation was extensive support for 59% of organizations. That's the blue bar, or moderate support, the green bar. Another 33% of organizations were moderately supporting these things, whether that's, whether you're in Azure with Blob or AWS with an S3, those services, those data store services are supported by the workload tool. Same with data pipeline management, whether you're doing some things with Hadoop or you're using Databricks. For organizations that took this survey, 50% of them said they are extensively supporting those processes with their workload tool. Another 41% have moderate support. And you can run right down the line here. Cloud-based ERP, compute, we already saw that 51% were building cloud environments. So when they manage the compute infrastructures, or rebuild, expand for capacity, what have you, these automation tools are already involved there. Same with supporting the services for CRM or support tools like ServiceNow or Salesforce. And we see, opening tickets automatically, getting data where it needs to go. These automation tools are heavily involved. And if we get more specific and we say, tell me exactly what kinds of cloud operations, so beyond just supporting the services, what's the function that you're hoping to accomplish? Again, these tools are involved. So we talked already about cloud infrastructure automation. This question asked that a bit differently, and 78% of organizations said absolutely, it's extremely or very important for them to use their workload tools for cloud infrastructure automation. Moving data in a hybrid cloud environment, we see a lot of this. Still a lot of mainframes in the world, right? But all these digital processes tend to live in the cloud, but oftentimes all that data is originating from mainframes. So moving data where it needs to be to process it in a hybrid environment is very important. 75% of organizations said it's extremely or very important. And then simplifying cloud migrations as things move around, automation can help do that. Also, orchestration and observability. So as these new processes get stood up, being able to have operations understand how they're performing, what might be slowing something down, what's going to cause an SLA violation, and get to the root cause and fix it. These tools can be heavily involved in both detecting that, diagnosing it, and fixing it. Multi-cloud orchestration is another big one. You'll see again, 73% of organizations. I don't think we envisioned having so many cloud environments, but the reality is most organizations have things running in 3, 4, 5 different clouds, and orchestrating processes that might span those and might also span onto the mainframe or onto on-prem stuff. There's a lot of orchestration that goes on across those cloud environments, and workload tools are definitely involved in supporting that. And if you're going to have all these environments, you're going to be moving data between them. So instead of, we talked about the hybrid cloud, getting data from on-prem to cloud systems. Here, it's just moving it from one cloud environment to another. But as these things spawn up in different clouds, there's a lot of data moving involved in and orchestration involved in doing digital transformation. And then these tools also help with managing containers and microservices. Many of them are aware of Kubernetes and can help in that process, regardless of how you're running a containerized environment. They've all been modernized in many cases to handle that. So I'll shift gears on you a little bit here, and let's think about the role that new architects and developers might have as they come to doing a new digital transformed process. Many times the architects and the developers aren't necessarily aware of the tools that operations uses and don't know what might be available to them. I asked this question: how do you think developers in your organization feel about workload automation software? And that was defined better in the survey. Developers was meant to include, architects of different systems, specifically cloud architects or other developers on the team, but just those folks who are designing and building these new processes. How do they feel about the workload tools? And you can see from, hey, that's all an ops problem, not my problem. That's their environment, that's their domain. I don't mess with it. To, well, it's mostly operations, or hey, I'm kind of neutral. It's a tool we all use. All the way out to the far right there, the two blue categories where we understand it's important, 12% or 13%. It makes us more productive and effective. And you'll notice a theme here that there's about 25 to 30% on a lot of these. How do you approach workload as you think about digital transformation? There's about a third of the organizations that seem to get that. In this case, we see 24% that I would categorize as dev positive, the blue pie slice there. About 28% are sort of, hey, it's a tool that's important, but it's whatever. I don't really lean on it or plan to leverage it. And then you've got the 48% that are pretty much old school thinking about this, right? And so you might say, okay, some get it, some think it's important. How does that affect their success? Well, we look at this next slide. I crossed, where are you at in the maturity cycle of your digital transformation? That chart we looked at before, where we saw that 21% were very mature, but 40% were just getting started, and that 37% in the middle were underway. And I've color coded this similarly so that the guys who say mostly ops are the red bar, the guys who said, oh, I'm neutral towards it, are the green bar, and the blue bar are the ones that are real positive. And if you can't see the correlation here, it just jumps off the page, right? The farther these folks are down that journey for digital transformation, those are the ones who are most adamant about, hey, I have to, lean on these workload tools. My developers, my architects were positive about those tools through the process. Now, I don't know the causation here. I just know there's a correlation. So whether these folks knew that when they entered the process or whether they learned it along the way is maybe up for debate. But I think if you've done IT for a while, I've done it for a long time in my career, we can probably assume that most of them didn't start there. They probably found that out moving through the process. You can learn from them if you're at the beginning of that process, or if you're underway. Look for those opportunities sooner rather than learning it as you go. But for whatever reason, the ones who have the most maturity here in their digital transformation are the ones that tend to be most positive towards these tools because they found value in that. Similarly, I asked, should workload automation tools be expanded to orchestrate automation across the enterprise? Is this broader orchestration role of value? And we see the same kind of, in fact, this is an even stronger correlation. Those who agree or strongly agree tend to be the ones who are farther through their journey of digital transformation than those who don't see that value. So again, I would say the ones who are at least, through the process, they've successfully got to end a job with their digital transformation, or those that are well along that path, they see this connection. And that's something that you should maybe, if you're at the beginning of this process, think about what could I figure out sooner that might help me get through the process more gracefully, faster, with better operation support when it does go to production. And there's a lot that these tools can bring to the party. One thing I wanted to highlight was orchestration brings observability and SLA policy awareness. Many of these workload tools, whether they connect to an external SLA policy engine where they get their knowledge of that, or in many cases, the SLAs are specifically defined within the tool because they're definitely connected to key delivery points that the automation has to make sure happen every day. In some cases, close a month, end of week, what have you. There's all these processes that have SLAs tied to them. And the workload automation tools are already connected and aware of that. So it's a benefit they can bring to the party with these new digital transform processes. In this case, one thing that we see is that as folks are pulling the workload tools into more and more processes, we've seen a lot of increase in jobs over the last 6-7 years. There's just more jobs running. A lot of that is just new data moving jobs. There's so much data to move around that a lot of the new jobs are just doing that alone. But there's a lot of jobs doing a lot of different things. You can see that in my research in 2020, we saw a rate of growth of 15, almost 16%. But in 2023, it's actually growing even faster. Now we're almost approaching 20% job growth year on year. So, it's increasing at an increasing rate, which tells me a couple of things. One, folks are pulling these tools in some of these digital transform processes, but are they really aligned with their operations teams? And are they making the most of these tools? Because as the job numbers have gone up, so have the job failure rates, and more SLAs are getting missed. You can see in 2020, both these surveys were done globally. We had about 400 respondents, and they were all enterprises with more than 500 employees. We had about 1.3% of jobs were failing, and in 2023 we see almost 1.6%. So I would say, there's more activity. There's bound to be maybe more problems, but Maybe some of these new things, we're not talking to each other as much as maybe we should be. So if you're involved in creating new digital transformation processes and you are leaning on these tools, great, but make sure that you're really talking to the operations folks as well, because you want that stuff to be supported and successful and not create, additional problems. As we can see in 2020, the SLA rate was one or more SLAs missed. 84% of organizations had that happen, and that increased to 89% in 2023. Again, we got a lot of new activity going on. I think with good design, good analytics, and making sure that SLAs are tied to every process, you can manage a lot of complexity with these tools. One thing that can happen is folks will only put an SLA on, say, the last major step in a process. And while that'll help you know if that's going to get hit or not, if there, in many cases, there might be 15, 20 other job streams that happen ahead of that final process that can represent hundreds or even thousands of jobs. And if all of them aren't being tracked at that level, you won't see the problem till the end of the process. And that may be in some cases what's going on here, that with maturity, they'll back up in the processes and add more SLA steps so that we can see problems evolving and when there's still time to correct them. But again, I would encourage you to look to those folks and engage them as you're designing these new processes. I think the earlier new applications and digital processes are orchestrated by WLA, the sooner they can benefit from the analytics capabilities and can run with more certainty. And I've already mentioned this several times, but a big part of this is moving data and managing data pipelines. It's really become a key part of modern IT and of digital transformation. WLA has always played a role in moving data around. I think it's the orchestration role gets used more and more. We see that it is even more important there. First of all, it gives you centralized control and end-to-end visibility. There's APIs that let you plug into all these different tools that are out there. So whatever you're using, it's likely it can be integrated or already is integrated. You get better logs and governance data. There's more permission-based security and role-based security that can be brought to bear that you don't have to create in a new digital process you're designing. And that whole data ops lifecycle from dev to test to production can be better managed with these tools. And then there's a lot of integration, as I mentioned already, that already exists with communication and collaboration tools like Slack and Teams, with ticketing systems for service desks like ServiceNow, sophisticated and proactive alerting and prioritization of alerts so that you don't get alert storms. So using these tools wisely can really help make them more manageable and save a lot of code you might otherwise write if you're creating a new digital process and not leveraging what already exists. And I think, again, the analytics that exist in some of these tools really help with root cause analysis. So I feel like using WLA orchestration really will speed development and make the process both more manageable and more successful. So as I think about wrapping up here, as you look forward, what you're doing, if you're not already being asked to do a lot more with automation, you're very likely will be. And many of you probably are already in the throes of either beginning these digital transform processes, supporting others who are, or that many of them are already underway and some might already be in production. But as you're going through that process, how do you bring this maybe more into focus for success? I think the first is learn from those that have gone before you. Those farthest down the path, really, they have architects and developers, as I've shown, that really value these tools and what they can bring to the party. Collaboration between traditional IT operations and cloud architects is really important so that when these things roll out, they're manageable right from the get-go, and you don't have to retrace your steps and figure out how to manage it, in those first few weeks after you go live. Supporting DevOps with automation is really where orchestration seems to be beginning. If you're not already bringing your workload tools into DevOps, that's a great place to start. And then your mindset should change. If you work in operations and you engage and interact with architects, with app developers and app owners or business folks, help them understand what you can do for them with automation. I interviewed one guy who worked managing a team around workload, who said, every time I talk to a business person, and I try to talk to one at least once a week, I ask them, if I could give you one button to automate something and make your job better, what would that be? And that doesn't mean all of that gets done, but show them that you're there to help and become that evangelist, and you'll get pulled in and get involved. And really get application users engaged with self-service and dashboards. Help them understand the tools that are available to them. I really think that if you can make this mind shift, digital transformation could really require maybe 25 or 30% less code if we learn to leverage the tools we already have in place. And I hope that you have a great rest of the sessions with Automation Summit. And I hope you find this information helpful. Thank you.